is up the Tube and the Steam blockchain. So today I want to talk about this idea that the smartphone is basically becoming the remote control of the universe. The remote control of the universe. And as we've heard stories about cavemen, that they had their club or stick and that they were walking around with it, and they basically needed this tool for doing stuff, right? And we have also if you think about the magician, they have their wand. Maybe you've seen it in the Harry Potter. You see this common theme where it's some person that has some tool that they're using for their benefit. So for example, in our current age, our club that the caveman sort of had, that we heard about in stories, our club is basically the smartphone. That the smartphone is the most useful tool at the moment in this specific time. Maybe in some other time there was more like Harry Potter, that you needed some magic tool or whatever. But yeah, I mean, in some ways you can say that it's the smartphone is also like a wand or a magic tool or whatever. But it's a little bit different. It's like a cool virtual reality screen. So where did I get this idea of the smartphone becoming like the remote control over the universe? Well, if you really take a look at it, you can see that the big thing that is interesting with smartphones that we didn't have in the past is how you can sort of make stuff happen without having to be in a specific physical location. So you can transmit data, you can transmit information into, maybe you can call it ether, or you can basically put something out there into the universe, and you can have that information reach other places, right? And this becomes in many ways like a remote control. I mean, it really does. When you really take a look at it deeper, it really becomes like a remote control. Because especially when these devices becomes even more advanced, where you implement token systems, blockchain systems, then you can create even larger incentives to basically make the device into a remote control, where you can make something happen at another location, and you can sort of, in many ways, you can play with data a lot more. So how a remote control works on a TV, and maybe you can say that the remote control to the TV, it was like the pre-phone in some ways. That you can change channels. Maybe you have 100. Maybe you started with three channels, and then you got 100 channels. So you can kind of tune in to various sources of stuff. But now it's going even more to a more advanced level, where we don't have channels. We don't have 100 channels, unlike a remote control. We have limitless channels. So, for example, you can produce something. You can be a prosumer. You're a consumer, and you are a producer, and you are a creator, right? So you get into this very interesting stage where it becomes very all-inclusive, and where the TV seems like the TV and the remote control, that seems to be very basic. It seems as why would we do that? Why would we do that when we have this super intelligent device that we're calling the smartphone, that basically will have AI? So you can sort of create your own music, TV shows, movies, games, you can basically simulate anything you want and sort of play around with that. And that means that basically you can create something new whenever you want. Yeah, I mean, that is clearly where it's going. And that's, of course, quite interesting. So eventually it's going to move to that phase where everyone has everyone is sitting on the same advanced, sophisticated technology combined with the best software. So now, at the moment, people are sitting on different hardware and different capabilities of that, and it can be pretty expensive, but eventually the price is going to go down, and people are going to do pattern recognize and realize, okay, this is the best device, and then they're going to do pattern recognize with software. Okay, this is the best to use. This is the most inclusive software. So yeah, it's really becoming the remote control over the universe. And a very interesting part about that is how people look at infrastructure basically in stuff they're doing online. So for example, a long time when followers was a new thing, it was something that people talked about a lot. Oh, I need to get followers. But eventually when everyone is following everyone, and when the ether and the AI is working amazing, it means that when a person is creating something, that you don't need to have followers because everyone's already sitting on the AI and the best infrastructure. So the moment something is being produced or something is being transmitted, it is in real time being picked up by whoever that is interested in that particular data or that particular source. So it creates this thing where people don't have to try to get attention because there's going to be such a high demand for something to consume. So for example, we see that people's rate of consumption is always going up, and there's always a higher demand for more stuff to be produced and consumed. So actually it's like, and there's not that many producers compared to like what the market wants, basically what people want to consume and sort of enjoy. So that's kind of interesting. And it's going to change the way I think that people look at things. So a lot of predictions just makes no sense at the moment, because people are usually having some reference point where they're trying to look at the old data that they have collected and sort of try to, so when they're seeing something new happen, they usually do not have much, especially when it's in the technology sphere, they usually don't have a reference point to sort of go back and sort of understand what this new event means, because it's something that is, it seems as this is the first time this smartphone thing is sort of happening, right? So with stuff that has happened in the past, like let's say a person want to build a house or something like that, people have more memory in their brain or something in generations of sort of how to look at those things. But when humans move into the phase of communicating with the device, and it's basically about new languages, people don't have that much reference points of how to look at it, basically. So, for example, we see it with, like, you can even say that people don't have that much reference points in how should you label the smartphone, well, like what kind of device is it, and because it started off as a pretty like a cold device, and now people are using it in other ways. So for example, you get some technology that comes out, and then people use their intelligence eventually, and then they might use it for something else. So for example, the telephone line started with just people calling each other, and then they started to use the telephone line to connect to the internet, right? So they did a bunch of other things that people did not have a reference point of, oh, what are people going to do with this new technology? It's the same as people don't at the moment have a reference point of maybe, oh, people are going to create tokens from nothing online. People are going to create their own movies. People are going to create their own games. This is not something that people had reference points to, or, for example, that the smartphone can work as a remote control over the universe. That's not something that usually people consider or have a reference point about. So it's very interesting to see this, and when people sort of realize in many ways that they're making up a lot of meanings in their head about stuff they see, and they use words, specific words, and they get images in their head. For example, with something like money, people look at it, consider it in a very physical way, and they're usually considering maybe some brand. Some money is a brand in many ways, and then they attach some symbol. So, for example, money has symbols. They attach they have some image in their head, and it's very interesting how we use numbers there to, oh, a bigger number, they get some other image in their head. And it's going to be interesting to see when we change that in sort of in a more abundant age, where people's way of looking at the world it can become less tied to the 3D dimension, because once you make numbers abundant, it's like time and space. It makes you at least consider it a little bit deeper of, well, if you have some numbers, some ones and zeros, and you have the best high technology that can sort of remote control things, it makes you consider things much deeper and maybe pay attention and be a little bit more open-minded about technology, because you may not understand exactly how something works, but you sort of you get the benefit of it. You enjoy the benefit basically of technology, and it can make you more open-minded to take in more. But it has to be like an experience, right? So for example, if you have a person that hasn't used a smartphone a lot and hasn't used all of its capabilities to its fullest potential, then it's kind of hard for them to have a reference point of, well, what do you mean when you're saying that the smartphone can sort of be a remote control to the universe? But if you use a smartphone a lot, you have an experience of it, and then that kind of thing pops into your head where you realize, well, the remote control over the universe. I mean, it basically means, yeah, there can be the stuff that happens at other places with what a device is doing, basically. Now, this gets very deep in some ways, because it means that eventually you can even take it as further as it can just be an AI box that can be anywhere. It can be in the so-called cloud. It doesn't have to be at a specific location, that is actually making some system at some other place run. And then you sort of realize in many ways that humans sort of are robots in many ways, how they sort of live, and how you can have systems that are basically that do pattern recognize, so they sort of know what humans are going to do next, and you can have systems run. You can have the remote control run a place. Then, of course, if their awareness goes up, then they can sort of realize that, and then they can make adjustments, right? But it's it's very interesting. It's very interesting because, I mean, it's just interesting because it just makes you take in so much more about how data works, and that we probably don't know exactly how data works and how data is basically everywhere, and that it's not just data in the device. So, for example, we are enjoying the benefit of smartphones a lot, and we sort of see how we can sort of detect that something of it works. It's great. But then you also have data around you in the real world that can also work in similar ways if people just also paid more attention to it as well, same as they did with their smartphone. But yeah, it's going to move more into that phase of, I think, where humans are going to realize more and more that this is a pretty good remote control, right? And it's kind of cool. Yeah, that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. Have an awesome day, DTube. Have a great day, Steam Blockchain. Bye-bye.